Miguel Perez's column appears every Wednesday and Friday in The Record, North Jersey's daily intelligence report. The Record, proud supporter of NJN.
Next on Images y Imágenes, a century of hidden Hispanic heritage. Saludos, welcome to Images y Imágenes. I'm Miguel Perez. There is no logical way of denying it. Latinos have a long history of contributions to North American society, a history that has been left out of the textbooks and the classrooms of this country. Some corrections have been made lately in some schools with multicultural education programs, but generally North American history has always been written as if time began when the Pilgrims landed, a blatant distortion of reality. Even if we are born in this country, sometimes Latinos are treated like foreigners, recent arrivals. But the truth is that our ancestors arrived here first, and that many parts of the United States were settled by Spanish explorers more than 100 years before the Pilgrims stepped ashore on Plymouth Rock in 1620. They established settlements in Florida, California, and throughout the Southwest. They discovered the Mississippi River, San Francisco Bay, and many other North American landmarks. And yet everything that happened here before 1620, more than a century when Latinos made many contributions to this society, have always been played down or totally ignored. And the same goes for the contributions we've made during the last 2 centuries, especially the Hispanic lives sacrificed to defend this nation. The hidden heritage of Hispanics in North America. That's the issue we'll be debating here tonight as we speak to a historian who has spent many years on a personal crusade to fill those gaps in American history, the gaps that exclude Hispanic contributions. Joe Monserrat is a former member of the New York City Board of Education, former director of the Office of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and an activist, a community activist involved in many other issues concerning Latinos. Mr. Monserrat, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be with you. My first correction, not 1 century, 3 centuries.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Let me just say before we go on that I consider myself a disciple of yours, because it was many years ago, more than 10 years ago, that I first interviewed you on this subject when I was doing columns, a series of columns for the New York Daily News.
I remember.
And I was inspired by everything that you had to say. And now when I go out and speak, this is my favorite subject. Oh. So, and I've gone on to read quite a lot about this issue. And I think it's something that we have to talk a lot more about and a lot more often in the Hispanic community. One of the first things you said to me that struck me is that this country is as much Spanish as it is English. Tell us about that.
Well, there's a perception that American history begins in 1608, Jamestown. But the fact is that by the time the Pilgrims arrived here, American history was 100 years old. I say that the United States is as much Hispanic as it is English, because it's from La Cuna de America, from the West Indies, that the United States begins to be born. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon, Puerto Rico's first governor and Puerto Rico's first migrant, comes and discovers the state of what is now the state of Florida. Discovered is a word that we all understand that it was there, but we're using that word because it's easier. But anyway, he comes, and this is the beginning, the first contact with this, what is now the United States, comes from the West Indies, specifically from Puerto Rico, and we begin. Now the next trip is Arayon comes, and he brings another group, and he settles for a while in what eventually became Jamestown.
Right.
Now, each one of these people are bringing things. They bring horses, and they bring things which begin to green America. They begin to green. Johnny Appleseed came 2 centuries late. Before Johnny Appleseed, we began to bring to this country almost everything that was later brought by the British. We begin by bringing the horse and the cow and the pig and the goat and the chicken and and alfalfa and hay and wheat and sugar and you name it, and we brought it. The one thing that people have difficulty is thinking in terms of centuries. Now, when we say this happened, we begin to talk about the 16th century. That's right. American history starts in the 18th, 17th, 18th century. But we have to remember that the first movement from Europe occurs in 1493, 1494, Puerto Rico, Cuba, all these other places discovered. By 1508, we're beginning to establish in the Caribbean, in the Spanish-speaking world, a beginning of a new civilization.
One of the things that really struck me when I first interviewed you on this subject is that you basically painted this picture in my mind. You said America was not settled or discovered or explored from east to west, as American history books lead us to believe, but from south to north.
That's right. Well, yeah, the first settlement is not north. It's in Florida, San Agustin, the oldest city
right.
in the United States. All of this is happening, and all kinds of things are going on, and the British have yet to arrive, because the British arrived late in the United States. And the reason I say that the United States is one of the largest Hispanic countries in the world is not just because our population in terms of numbers makes this one of the largest Hispanic countries in the world.
The fifth largest, I believe, in the world by population.
By population. But the Spanish language and Spanish values and aspects of Spanish culture have been a part of the development of the United States from the beginning. In fact, it was, in some places, the beginning. And none of these things are new. In fact, Spanish influence and Spanish culture and Spanish reality is so embedded in the fabric of the United States that we don't know it when we see it. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the most American symbols is John Wayne, walking down a dusty street in his cowboy outfit in a town. Now, the town is usually a Spanish town, but what most Americans don't recognize, and by Americans I mean all of us, is that from the top of his 10-gallon hat to the tip of his spurs, everything he has on is Spanish in origin.
Why doesn't history, American history, recognize that? There is a hidden heritage there.
There's been a struggle for a long time in American history. Most American history is written up in New area, the Harvard areas, etc. And there's a big movement to keep people from thinking that the United States developed along the lines that other countries of America developed. And to accept this would mean that this is not just a British country. You know, the poet Walt Whitman said something. That I have a note here that I should be able to find in a second, which sort of points out the fact. Back in when Santa Fe was celebrating.
Well, I have a quote here from Mr. Whitman while you're looking for yours. It might be the same one.
It is the same one.
We Americans have yet to really appreciate our antecedents. Thus far, impressed by New England writers and schoolmasters, we tacitly abandon ourselves to the notion that our United States have been fashioned from British Isles only, and essentially from a second England only, which is a very grave mistake.
Absolutely.
Walt Whitman in 1883, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago.
History in the United States is taught very selectively.
But it's not just a question of what is omitted, but let me read something that you said to me and have you expand on that. 10 years ago, you said that you have to wonder why Spanish explorers are depicted as people who did not settle or colonize, but merely explored, sought gold, and killed Indians, while the English are pious and industrious and came to build homes and establish settlements and raise families. It's a perception also.
Well, it's called the Black Legend. The Black Legend is You see, Spain beat out all of the great powers of Europe. Spain was here 300 years. Spain did a lot of horrible things, but Spain did also a lot of wonderful things, a lot of very developing things. And the black legend, which was used by the British and the Dutch and the French as they began to come and take and raid those things which were Spanish, they did it in the name by saying that the Spaniards only came to look for gold and to kill the Indians and to go back. In the meantime, in the first 50 years of the Spanish presence in the New World, they built 200 cities. In the first 50 years, they colonized, they settled half of the continent. We begin to get some of this settlement from the English, but the English never really discovered, they rediscovered. The English never really created, they recreated, because everything that they came to do had been done already. And it's an attempt to maintain the concept that this is a nation of Albion's seed, Albion being Old England, that 85% of the American public has no relation to British. But to this day, we're still saying that this is a British nation. And in order to keep that myth alive, they eliminate the contributions of other things. There are other people who contributed. Europeans in the middle part of the United States, Swedes in the Minnesotas, and the French who came down. All of these people are seen as incidental to American history. And the fact is that the Hispanic contribution, and I use the word Hispanic different than most people. The Hispanic people I'm talking about are American. These are the descendants of the original conquistadores. Because, you know, this goes in three, again, I go back to talking about time. The first 50 years, well, what is the first 50 years? From about 1500 to 1550. 1500 to 1550. Now, in this time, by 1550, we had ranches with cows, we had horses, we began to seed the horse. There were no American cowboys until after 1848. American cowboys did not exist because cowboys are Hispanic.
Let's get back to the education, though, because it's when you mention that these Hispanics are Americans, these Hispanics who are American, who don't know their history,
that's
it's
correct.
A problem within our own community. I mean, you know, it's through no fault of our own that we don't know that we have heroes in the Hispanic community.
It's very, of course we have heroes. You know, in 1776, when on the east coast of what is now the United States, we were signing the Declaration of Independence on the west coast, Juan Bautista de Anza was discovering the city of San Francisco at pretty much the same time.
It's not San Francisco Bay, it's San Francisco Bay, right, for a reason. Hernando de Soto, who discovered the Mississippi River and went all the way up through the Mississippi, actually was buried in the Mississippi 100 years before the Pilgrims landed.
He was drifted down the river so the Indians wouldn't find his body at that time. Yes, and in all that time, all of these expeditions were leaving behind goats and sheep and horses, and America, what people found when they came were already seeded. And this is the contribution of the ancestors of those kids who are Hispanic today. A Hispanic kid can't turn around and say, hey, I helped my people help create this nation. This is what's the horror of. Not only can't the Hispanic kid say that, he's never learned that lesson, but his classmate has never learned that lesson. Mm-hmm. Nor has his black brother and sister learned about what the blacks contributed. You know, the first cowboys were Indians, and they were blacks because to punch cows, to take care of cows was work that Spaniards didn't want to do. This was hard work. It was not for 2 centuries later before they entered the picture. But it's a little bit ironic that the first cowboys were Indians who developed an entire nomenclature of of the lariat, the lasso, from Spanish.
De Soto explored the territory that later became Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And yet, history books tell us that Lewis and Clark were the first white eyes to see the North American wilderness. 250 years later.
Well, before that was the Coronado expedition.
That's right.
You know, they went up and went to the entire South, up as north, as far north as Kansas. When one of Coronado's lieutenants went into Arizona, and he wrote back a report, and he said, "Hemos descubrido el hoyo más grande del mundo." We have found the biggest hole in the world, and that was the Grand Canyon.
Right. People like Bernardo Galvez, who also fought in the American Revolutionary War, the contributions to this country's wars by Latino. Bernardo de Galvez is the namesake of Galveston, Texas.
Right.
Few people know that.
No, it's, well, the fact is that few people know that the Spanish helped in the American Revolution. The American Revolution began first as a struggle of 13 colonies against the mother country, England. But then it became an international war. It became an international war when France came on the side of the Americans and when Spain came on the side of the Americans. And it's these aspects of a civilization, again, that we don't know.
They don't know that Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Venezuelans, and Mexicans fought in the Revolutionary War, and they won major battles, like in Pensacola and Mobile, and that they not only contributed men, but they contributed ammunition, money, ships.
They tied up the Spanish fleet so that the Spanish fleet couldn't get, I mean, the English fleet, the Spanish fleet tied up the Spanish fleet so that they couldn't move, and it was very important, too, the success of Washington and the Revolution in the United States. Yeah, this is the reality. American history is taught selectively. American history is taught not only selectively in terms of where it happens, but when it happens. Because if you begin history at the time when it becomes part of what is the English part of the world, then this history is American. But to say that the history before this was Spanish history, or part of the history of the development of America, this is not done. And this is something which we're still trying very, very hard to fight. And I think that very often this business about revision history, etc. No, we're not trying to teach a new history. What we're trying to say is that history has to be taught to include all of the people who participated in it.
In the 1960s and the 1970s, throughout this country, there was a movement to fill those gaps that have been left with the contributions, regarding the contributions of African Americans. There were Black awareness courses, as I remember they were called, and that has never really been done as well as it should be with the Hispanic contributions.
Certainly not on the East Coast. On the West Coast,
there's more of it?
A lot, yeah. In the Middle West, for example, they've celebrated the 400th anniversary of Coronado, and they do a lot of it. But certainly in this part of the country, no. You know, one of the problems, again, is that many of our neighbors, our fellow citizens, are very recent arrivals. And we are a people of America. We are not a European people. Hispanics are a people of America. The Hispanic that I talk about is the amalgam of the European Spanish influence, the native Indian influence, and the 12 million Africans that were forced out of Africa. This is all part of an amalgam which begins to be the creation of the American. And it's a very special creation, because these are the people who do not come from Europe. They were born here, they were developed here, they did not cross, and their interest is primarily in the New World. This becomes difficult for some people to accept, to understand. And so if you are taught, if you go to the X School of Education, and the methodology of the X School of Education is to teach XYZ, then what you're going to teach the kids is XYZ.
Sometimes, though, it's our own responsibility, our own community. Sometimes I'm a little bit critical in my column, for example, of Hispanic Heritage Month, because unlike Black History Month, which is all about lectures, which is all about teaching, which is all about exposing those role models, we tend to do too many parades, too many cocktail parties on Hispanic Heritage Month, and not enough of what we're doing here today.
But you know, Miguel, we have a problem. We're very almost schizophrenic about it. Because we have a problem. For the longest time, the Native American aspect and the African aspect of our heritage was pretty much denied and was all Hispanic. And all of a sudden, we want to change this. And so we change it by denying that there's any Hispanic in our background. And this has created a great deal of problems. This business of are we Latinos or are we Hispanics? This
within
becomes,
our own community.
Yes, this becomes an issue which is not a very big issue, I don't think, in relation to what you're talking about. So that we still have to begin to learn about ourselves. And the difference about us is, you know, we Hispanics from all over the world, from all over the Spanish-speaking world, live in the United States, and we have some new things happening to us. You from Cuba and me from Puerto Rico, we are citizens of the United States. Mexicans, we are fellow citizens. And this whole new fellow citizenship relationship is a new one, and we're a little concerned about it. Because don't call me Hispanic, call me Puerto Rican. Don't call me this. Well, okay, we can understand that because we're still insecure about this. But we are having and developing a whole new, you know, the Time magazine the other day, not too long ago, came up with a picture.
Yeah, the composite picture of what the new American will look like.
It took 300 years to make the people of Latin America. It took 300 years to make Cubans. It took 300 years to make Puerto Ricans, Argentinians. The United States is only 200 years old. We still have another century. And it's in that century that we, the people of America, are in the making. The United States, it's not only graying, it's also browning. And there is a new, because of the change in the demographic realities of what is America, we are now to the point where Time magazine goes and has a computerized picture of what an American of the future is going to look like.
And she looks very Hispanic.
She looks very, 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 very.
So much more that we inherited from Spain and from Latin America.
There are two parts to this, Miguel. The early 15th, 16th century is Spaniards. The vaquero originates in Spain. The cattle drives originate in Spain. Sheep drives originate in Spain. The battle between sheepmen and cattlemen originates in Spain. All of that is brought here when Columbus lands his horses in Isabela, the first town that he makes in Hispaniola, and when the other people bring, Villalobos brings the first cows to Mexico. Now, for 2 centuries, and again, one of the things that's difficult to remember is the time involved here. But during the 15th and the 16th century, in what part of Mexico, cows were turned loose, escaped, horses escaped, and they began to seed. Remember, the horse originated in this continent 60 million years ago, and then he disappears. And then Cortez brings him back to the world. Now, that group begins to move north. And as they move north, remember, there is no United States yet. This is just open land here. Mm-hmm. And they begin to move up. And as the people now are not the conquistadores anymore. These are now people who are colonizers. These are now people who are in business, who are living here. And as they discover silver mines and they create this, there's a lot of wealth developed. And what do they do with this wealth but begin to invest it in livestock and in land? And as they begin to move north, they begin to get into what is now part of the United States. And this, of course, is before that very overcrowded little ship from whom everyone in America wants to be a descendant of, landed at Plymouth Rock. This is before this. Now, as they move north, and we were talking last week about the fact that what is now the United States was settled more from south to north rather than from east to west. These movements join, but it starts in the south. Now, what is it that's brought now to this new world? We begin to bring the cattle industry as an industry, the sheep industry as an industry. To this day, shepherds are brought from the Basque country of Spain to take care of sheep in the western states. They begin to do a lot of things. They begin to cultivate the raisin and the grapes for wine. The wine industry is developed. The cotton industry, the sugar, all of these things are contribution of this group that is...
Mr. Monserrat, there's a lot that we can say about the Old West, the Spanish heritage of the Old West. But there's a lot also in that West that has to do with vocabulary, for example. Spanish was the first language spoken here. You hear this movement of officializing the English language, but Spanish was spoken here before English was.
Well, as a matter of fact, every English speaker speaks Spanish every day and doesn't know it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know? He's saying Los Angeles. He may pronounce it badly, but he's saying, Cabo Raton in Florida. He's saying Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Agustin, San Diego, Las Vegas,
Florida, Colorado.
Florida. And then he goes on to states, yes, Arizona, Florida, Nevada, Montaña, all Nuevo Mexico, all are Spanish words, and he's speaking Spanish. He's using a lot of words. You hear now numero uno, and you hear all kinds of usage, savvy, sombrero, lasso, rodeo, as you mentioned before. Rodeo, what? Rodeo comes from the Spanish word rodear, which means to surround. And the rodeos began when the cowboys began to recognize that cows did not see human beings for months. And they were not accustomed to the human beings. So once a year, in order to get them accustomed that they could work with them, they would gather in all of the cows and they would rodearlas. They began, and then from this rodeo, other things began to develop. But this is now a very important part of the culture of the American Southwest. Rodeos, when you go out there, are one of the things that you visit the Southwest. America is from, Tierra del Fuego, all the way up. It isn't just from the 49th parallel to the Rio Grande.
Yeah, well, how did that come about that they started calling themselves United States citizens, started calling themselves American, when in fact all of us, you were born in Puerto Rico, I was born in Cuba, but we're just as American as anyone else?
Well, it began the United States of America. And the trouble with that is that there's also the United States of Mexico, which is, it begins to create a problem, but sometimes we're a little arrogant and possess things and have no concept of the fact that there are other parts to this continent which are very, very much a part of it and very much equal to what we do.
America, after all, was named after Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian sailor who sailed for Spain. And, originally, my understanding is that the original America was South America because that's the part of the continent discovered by Vespucci.
Well, but then the two continents, people say that we didn't discover anything, and people say, but this became a new world. Europe had no idea that this part of the world existed, any more than this part of the world knew that Europe existed. So that for each, they discovered each other. They discovered something that was unknown. It wasn't that the land wasn't there, and it wasn't that the people weren't there, but they were new people to each other,
right.
And they didn't know each other.
Right.
And so that when these words are used, this is the meaning which I use them anyway. People try to say encounter. Well, it's more than an encounter. This happened. Now, in the movement, we don't only have the cattle and the sheep industry, which is so basic to to the concept of the American frontier, to the concept of rugged individualism, to the concept of these things are also part of the Hispanic contribution. When they are adopted and they become Americans, in quotes, it isn't that they didn't exist for the other, it's just that everybody forgets that that's how it started.
Mr. Monserrat, when you were speaking earlier about how we are all Americans regardless of which part of the continent we were born in, I'm reminded of a lesson that I was taught by you. When I'm asked nowadays how long me and my relatives have been in this country, I tell them several hundred years. And when I'm asked how long you've been an American, I tell them, hey, all my life. But there are other things that we have not had enough time to discuss. One of them is the American dollar. Sometimes we are told that we come here for the mighty American dollar.
Well,
you're wearing a dollar there,
I'm
aren't you?
wearing a Spanish dollar, which was used as an American dollar. This is an 1810 one. And the reason was that they minted. We didn't have mints. You remember the United States wasn't a nation yet. The United States, not being a nation, didn't have national money. It wasn't until after the Constitution, etc., that we became a nation. We didn't become a nation in 1776. It took many years more, and so we needed tender. And one of the things that did have value were the Spanish doubloons and the Spanish reales and the Spanish pieces of 8. And to this day, we still talk about some of these things. You know, the use of terms that refer to the way in which 2 bits. The 2 bits were split from the coin. And you talk about things cost 2 bits, 4 bits, 6 bits. Well, that all is part of the contribution of the way in which money was used.
But the American dollar was really modeled after the Spanish dollar, which was already distributed throughout the Southwest.
Yes, the doubloons, etc. Absolutely. But I'm saying this was so because we didn't have a national mint to mint money for what then became the United States. So we had to have an international dollar. I mean, the dollar from the state of New York or from Virginia, etc., were not recognized. So we needed something that would be recognized in all of the states, and they began with the Spanish dollar and the Spanish coins, which were recognized and valued because they were made of silver and they were made of gold, and that was the value. They weren't paper money.
We don't have much time left, but if you were in front of a classroom right now, speaking especially to Hispanic students, in a college classroom, a high school classroom, and you wanted to talk to them about how sometimes they are treated like foreigners and how they should respond, about the heritage, the proud heritage that they should know and be able to speak about, what would you tell these students?
Well, what I do tell them, in the first place, you have a right to recognize that you, through your ancestors, have made as great a contribution to the development of what is today known as the United States as any other people. You have not only made contributions in terms of these cultural things which are now known as American, but in your own right, you have helped Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans came and filled jobs that other people wouldn't fill. Mexican farm workers came to pick the crop and came to pick the food and the cotton and the things that make clothes to feed other people. We have no reason to be ashamed of anything. On the contrary, this is what I think we must feel. We are an integral part of what is now the United States.
The lesson to be taught not only on Hispanic Heritage Month, but throughout the year. And it is often said, thank you very much for having been here. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you again. 2 programs on this subject, and we have to do it more. We have to talk about this more. It is often said that in order to know where you are going, you have to know who you are and where you came from. But we have an education system that doesn't teach Latino students where they come from, making it harder for them to understand who they are. Young Latinos may not have many heroes, but today we've shown that it's not because they don't exist, it's because they don't know them. The education system has denied them access to their own heroes, their own history, and thus their own future. At Images Imágenes, we hope that by exposing our Hispanic roots, today we sparked your desire to make sure that our proud heritage is no longer hidden. The future of our children can be affected by all of us by teaching them about history of contributions to this great nation. We can make sure they march forward with a sense of pride and self-esteem. I'm Miguel Perez, and I'll see you next week on another edition of Images Imágenes. But for now, we leave you with a demonstration of a malambo dance of the Argentinian gauchos.
Miguel Perez's column appears every Wednesday and Friday in The Record, North Jersey's daily intelligence report. The Record, proud supporter of NJN.